Welcome, guys. It's Scott here from Woke Societies, here to drop a awesome episode here on September the 11th. So it's no surprise, today's episode is just going to be about 9/11, and I'm going to be giving you guys a different story of what I think was really behind 9/11. Obviously, we know the commissioner's report that came out, or you can say the official report that came out. It's all BS. I obviously think this was an inside job based on scientific evidence that I found and researched, and many of engineers and scientists have also researched myself. I'm not saying I'm a scientist. I'm just saying from what I found, there are a lot of red flags with what happened that day. So I'm going to jump into all that. I'm going to jump into what the new investigation that's going to be opened into 9/11 at the end of the show. And I'm also going to give you guys, again, a different motive and a different view of why I thought all this the attacks happened. There's multiple reasons why it happened, but I'm going to be showing you guys something that I really believe was 9/11 was used as a distraction to get away from the UFO topic, the advanced technologies topic that would take away from fossil fuels and all that good stuff. So just a quick shout out to all my followers, subscribers, fans. Thank you for supporting the show. We're at currently 370 on the subscribers. I would love to hit 400 by the end of this month. I don't think 500 is going to happen because I'm definitely getting censored on YouTube. Facebook, I can't get any engagements. I can barely break 20 engagements now on my Facebook. And Twitter, I'm losing followers every day. So, especially with 9/11 stuff on YouTube, it's censored. Probably the most heaviest topic that's censored on YouTube. So let's get started, guys, shall we? So this is where I want to begin. So this was on May 9th, 2001. So this is obviously before September 11th. There was something called the Disclosure Project, headed by Dr. Stephen Greer. And the whole point, he was holding a conference called the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And the whole point of this was to get a collective unit of CIA agents, NSA, NASA, scientists, military, engineers, you name it, to get together to get information out to the public to say, hey, there are UFOs, we have their craft, we've even gotten dead ETs from these craft, some living, and the public needs to know about what's going on out in the world, really what's going on. The technologies, all that stuff, right? So he holds this conference, and I'm just going to show you guys, in case you haven't seen this, the original video is on YouTube. It's almost 2 hours long of the full conference. So I'm going to just play about 3 minutes of it so you guys can just catch a glimpse of the magnitude of this meeting. Here we go.
Members of the press, the American public, and people of the world. We are here today to disclose the truth about a subject that has been ridiculed and questioned, denied for at least 50 years. The men and women who are on this stage and the some 350 additional military intelligence witnesses to the so-called UFO matter and extraterrestrial intelligence can prove and will prove that we are not alone. We can prove through the testimony and documents that we will be presenting that this subject has been hidden from members of Congress and at least 2 administrations that we are aware of, presidential administration. This is a matter of great importance, and I ask the media, the scientific community, and the political community to look seriously at this matter and to do the right thing for humanity and for our children.
My name is Don Phillips. I was in the United States Air Force and had worked with certain intelligence agencies of the United States government.
Graham Bethune. I'm a retired Navy commander, pilot, had a top secret clearance.
My name is Dan Willis. I was in the United States Navy. I held a top secret crypto level 14 extra sensitive material handling security clearance.
20 years ago, in 1980, I was a security specialist assigned to RAF Bentwaters, Woodbridge, NATO Air Force facilities. A 3-night UFO event where objects made incursions over our WSA. These objects were on the ground on 2 different nights. We had a secret security clearance.
We had ground visual, ground radar, airborne visual, and airborne radar. These vehicles have been seen and confirmed all over the planet.
In 1992, we detected 15 objects west side of the Toluca airport.
I was the division manager for the Accidents Evaluation and Investigation Division.
Bright, glowing red object hovering outside the front gate. It was oval-shaped. My weapons started going down, one after the other. They went into a no-go condition, what we call a no-go condition. They were unlaunchable.
The UFO was seen near the missile silos, and the missiles were deactivated.
My name is Donna Hare, and I worked at Philco Ford Aerospace. I did the launch slides and landing slides, and also projection plotting boards, lunar maps for NASA. The Apollo astronauts saw craft on the moon when we landed. The astronauts are told to keep this quiet. They're not allowed to talk about it.
I was a precision electronics photographic repairman with a top secret crypto clearance. In 1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter project at NASA. By the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers.
This is the NASA document right here that was declassified.
My name is Dwayne Arneson. I served 26 years as a communication electronics officer in the U.S. Air Force, all over the world, including Vietnam. The UFO had crashed on the island of Spitsbergen, Norway, and the team of scientists were coming to investigate it. I held the top secret SCI TK clearance.
One had landed or crashed at Fort Dixon McGuire, right?
My name's Clifford Stone. I was Sergeant First Class, United States Army. I could get the clearance that I needed to do whatever it was that was necessary for me to do at the time on special operations when I was called in on those. What I'm referring to here is that I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers. I've been involved where we have recovered these objects. We know them to be of extraterrestrials. While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive.
And the secret government, which is concealing this information from the American public. And I am happy and proud to serve as General Counsel.
So guys, that is a 4-minute clip of the 8-minute clip of the highlights of just the introductions of all the people that were involved with this, with the Disclosure Project. This was in May of 2001. And now you guys heard just snippets of their testimonies, right? You had a woman from NASA saying she was going through photos from the moon missions that were photos taken from the dark side of the moon, where the astronauts saw craft on the moon as they were landing, and they were told to keep quiet about it. The other gentleman saying there were spherical buildings and towers on the moon. Guys, so many more insiders have come out since. This was back in 2001. Guys like Corey Good, Emery Smith, all these guys all have the same stories, especially about the moon when it comes to craft. There is a gigantic lunar base already on the moon. It's been there for decades. Guys, it's underground. And it's also on top of the ground. They use cloaking stuff. They use some kind of cloaking system to hide themselves, right? But that's not the whole point of this. The whole point of this is showing that the date that this happened was in May of 2001. This was a gigantic conference, and they were calling on Congress to take some action and to actually tell people what really was going on. So that's where I want to start off. Again, this is Dr. Stephen Greer. You guys can actually watch the full video. But their whole point was to get UFOs out the proper way and to also disclose the technologies and what's going on. And so you also heard these people talking about super top secret high level clearances. working for projects that aren't in the public domain, secret space programs. These programs have to be funded by millions, maybe even billions, could be trillions of dollars, right? We don't know the number. So everyone knows, leading up to 9/11, just the day before, the story of Donald Rumsfeld. It's not a story, this is the history of it. There was trillions of dollars missing from the Pentagon, right? And here's this video, just real quick.
The day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, consider the case of one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
We know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on.
Jim Minery, a former Marine turned whistleblower, is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense agency's balance sheets. Minery tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the country looking for records.
The director looked at me and he says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, you know. My supervisor asked me why I care about doing a good job. So.
He was reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem by just writing it off.
They got to cover it up. That's where the corruption comes in. They've got to cover up the fact that they can't do the job.
The Pentagon.
And there you have it, guys. And you guys might already know all this stuff already, but for the ones who don't, this is why I'm showing this video. Now, you have, again, this huge disclosure conference. It made nationwide news, obviously. It was being talked about around the world about UFOs and this huge movement that these people wanted to start. Again, CIA, NSA, NASA, scientists, engineers, everybody you could possibly think of. Hundreds of people coming out that were actually in these space programs talking about UFOs and that they actually worked with them, worked with their technology, the moon stuff, everything, right? And the Pentagon is acting like 2.3 trillion just went missing. They know where it went. And I don't have any solid evidence, guys, of where that money went, but just my humble opinion, I believe a lot of that money has been going towards these secret space programs that still exist today. And eventually, hopefully, the Space Force is going to bridge that gap to disclosure for the public. But $2.3 trillion went missing, right? And this was the day before 9/11. So again, you have this conference talked about for months, and then leading up to it, you have all this money, right? This is a huge story. Rumsfeld is going to find out what happened to it. He's calling for domestic enemies afoot. And literally the next day, we all know what happened. We have 9/11. A day that I won't ever forget. Being in New York, living in New York my entire life, I've lived in the same county my entire life, which is Orange County, which is, a little over an hour away from the city. But I won't ever forget, I was in middle school at the time. I was in 6th grade. It was my second period class, and we got the announcement over the loudspeaker that New York City was attacked, the Twin Towers were attacked, and planes flew into the buildings, and that's all we knew. And everything kind of just stopped. I was in middle school. I was probably, 12, 13 years old at the time. Not really thinking anything, this is crazy, this is sad. But seeing where it started to hit me was when the teachers and other faculty started coming into different classrooms and pulling kids out and whispering into their ears. And then these kids suddenly bursting into tears and then them leaving the classroom and then ultimately leaving the school. Not really knowing what was going on at the time, but a lot of these these kids that were being pulled out were the mothers pulling their kids out because their fathers were down in New York City because they were firemen or they were firefighters, first responders up where we lived that wanted to go help. And the rest is history. So being in New York at that time, guys, was very... After, we got home that first night, everyone really realizing once the towers went down, that was... Like, everything kind of just blacked out. Wow, it's like, wow, we were attacked. And being so young, it took like a day or two for that to sink in, but then it sinks in. It's like, oh my God, this is really happening. So, as the months and months went on, we were waiting for the official report. The official report came out, and nothing really came out of it after that, right? But especially for me, as far as going down the conspiracy theory road in my life, as I got older, something never sat well with how the buildings were attacked, how it was allowed to happen. I took criminal justice growing up in college. I took criminal justice associate's degree in college, and all of my professors, for the most part, were New York City police officers and detectives, and they were all down there during that time. And hearing their stories, hearing how they said things were happening compared to what the report came out, they themselves seeing what was actually happening did not line up with anything of the commission report. And from that time on, I started doing my own research, and then the documentary called Loose Change came out. And if you guys haven't seen it, it's an amazing documentary. It was made in 2007, mainly composed of scientists and engineers going deep into the physics and the way these buildings fell and all that stuff. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. But just giving you a little background of where I was coming from, this is what started me down the whole conspiracy theory road, I guess you could say, and triggered something in my brain to not accept what's given to us at face value anymore. Not to accept what the news says, and to start thinking for yourself and do your own research and come to your own truths on your own. So 9/11 again was bittersweet for me. It started me on this track, and now I'm here years later because of other events like QAnon and Trump and all that stuff. And here we are. Here's the beginning of an hopefully amazing YouTube channel that's already begun. So that's my whole spiel. I'm sure everyone can remember where they were when this event happened. It was terrifying. We didn't know if there was going to be more attacks. We didn't know if more buildings were going to be attacked in different areas of the country. Obviously, we know that the Pentagon was supposedly hit, which, I don't believe at all. Looks like an explosion. And again, the plane that crashed out in Pennsylvania, there was barely any wreckage of that plane, which is one of the most weirdest things about this whole 9/11 thing was what happened to that plane. So let's jump into the rest of the information. I just wanted to start out with those two guys to get your feet wet. Now, this was an article that came out about 5 days ago by Zero Hedge. Major university study finds fire did not bring down Tower 7 on 9/11. And now, guys, Tower 7 was somewhat of an anomaly, right? Everyone was focused in on the Twin Towers collapsing. And then all of a sudden, Tower 7 came crashing down the same exact way, completely falling down into its footprint. Perfectly. Didn't lopside, didn't tilt, didn't switch angles, completely fell straight down on itself. And the official report at the time was this was due to office fires. Now, guys, you have to remember, this was 2001. If something like this had happened today, in a few hours, we would have contradicting reports of citizen journalists like myself and people all over the world looking into this and debunking the mainstream media story. I don't even know if cell phones were a thing yet, like the old school cell phones. 2001, I remember having a desktop computer be an XP, and the computer was gigantic. So I think cell phones were around, but they were the really old Nokia ones. But But the official story was office fires, right? So on September 11, 2001, World Trade Center Building 7 suddenly collapsed into its own footprint, falling at free fall speeds for 2.5 seconds of its 7-second complete destruction. Naturally, skeptics have been questioning the official story for some time, and after moving from the realm of conspiracy theory into the realm of science, an extensive university study has found that the official story of fire causing the collapse is simply not true. This week, architects and engineers from 9/11 Truth announced their partnership with the University of Alaska Fairbanks in releasing a draft report of an in-depth 4-year study of what actually brought down World Trade Center 7. According to the press release, the release of the draft report begins a 2-month period during which the public is invited to submit comments. The final report will be published later this year. The UAF research team utilized 3 approaches for examining the structural response of WTC-7 to the conditions that may have occurred on 2001. First, we simulated the local structural response to fire loading that may have occurred, where most of the fires in World Trade Center are reported to have occurred. Second, we supplemented our own simulation by examining the collapse initiation hypothesis developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they go on to the third. After conducting comprehensive modeling and studying countless scenarios, the study's authors, J. Leroy Holsey, Zilai Kwan, bridge engineer, South Carolina Department of Transportation, and Feng Shuao, associate professor in Nanjing University of Science and Technology Department of Engineering, concluded the following. Fire did not cause the collapse of WT-7 on 11, contrary to the conclusions of the national report and private engineering firms that studied the collapse. The secondary conclusion of our study is that the collapse of WT-7 was a global failure involving the near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. So what they're saying there, guys, is what caused the building to collapse was a near simultaneous failure of every single column in that building, which would make sense because it's literally collapsing onto itself. It wasn't part of the building that collapsed due to fires. It was literally every structure almost at the same exact time that was destroyed, and then it fell on itself perfectly flat onto itself. Does that sound like fires, guys? Absolutely not. The results of the study cannot be dismissed. It completely destroys the narrative that has been shoved down the throats of Americans for nearly 2 decades. What's more, the study backs up thousands of other researchers, scientists, and engineers who have been pointing this out for years. In fact, as TFTP reported in July, history was made in regard to 9/11 as New York area fire commissioners called for a new investigation of the tragic events that unfolded that day. The resolution called for a new investigation due to the overwhelming evidence that pre-planted explosives caused the destruction of 3 World Trade Center buildings. And the article continues on and on, guys. So we're going to get into all this. And I've already mentioned probably about 3 weeks ago about an article talking about I can't remember where they're from, but it's a fire, Franklin Square in Munson Fire District, there it is, just outside of Queens, are the ones that are triggering this new investigation and setting the fire to this investigation to reopen it and to look into 9/11. And the funny thing is, it's not really funny, but the mainstream media never picked up on the story. Back when all this happened, it was all, the mainstream media was all, very patriotic, one nation under God, God bless America. I remember all the stickers, everything, guys. Everybody was all on the same page, which was a good thing. It showed, it showed nationality. It showed that we were all united, which we were. There's no doubt about it, especially out here in New York. New York, it felt like there was a dark cloud over New York for months after all this went down. It was just terrible. But there was no coverage of this new investigation that this Franklin Square Munson Fire District wants to get started. And their whole point is to get all the New York fire departments on board with this to get this started. And it just questions, why wouldn't the media get behind it now? Because if the media was really for America, for finding the truth, they'd be all over this story, getting it out to everybody to really jumpstart it. But there was no coverage on the story. It makes me sick, guys. Makes me absolutely sick. Who's controlling us? What's controlling us? Why do they not want us to know the truth? So let's transition to the architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. I just want to get to the main things that media and Google, if you guys Google 9/11 thermite, free fall acceleration, 9/11 controlled demolition, everything on Google, the first page and the first selections are all things talking about conspiracy theories and how these theories are debunked. On the first page, guys, Google it doesn't surprise you anymore, but it just makes me so angry. There's scientific evidence. We're about to see this. And if you guys haven't seen this, I'm going to show you this in the free fall acceleration, and we're going to get into some more articles. So this is something that I don't see a lot of the conspiracy theorists talk about. And this was a big point in that documentary, which I mentioned before, called Loose Change, that there was thermite particles found all over the place in the wreckage of 9/11 and all over the steel beams. So let's just take a look and see what this says real quick. We're not going to watch all of it, just part of it. It's 5 minutes.
Out of the ashes of the World Trade Center devastation rises the Freedom Tower, whose foundation, however, is shrouded in question. For example, in the World Trade Center dust, an international team of scientists find an advanced form of highly energetic nanothermite composites. What is it, and where does it come from?
In the dust, we found what we characterize as unreacted thermitic material in the shape of some very tiny red-gray chips. And in the reaction, they produce molten iron, which is the prime indication of a thermitic reaction. And such a reaction can be used to destroy steel structures. What we have found is a modern version of thermite, which we call nanothermite, which is produced in a different way. It is not just two powders being mixed. The material is actually built from the atom scale up. We call it the bottom-up procedure, which is what you do in nanotechnology. The ingredients are much smaller, which means they're reacting faster and they're more easily ignited.
The primary elements in the red material are aluminum, iron oxide, as well as silicon and carbon. The iron oxide appears in faceted grains, approximately 100 nanometers across. The aluminum appears in thin platelets, about 40 nanometers thick. In ordinary thermite, the particle size is much larger, and hence ordinary thermite is an incendiary. Whereas as the particle size becomes smaller and smaller, super thermite is sometimes called. This red material contains also a significant amount of carbon, and the formulation of nanothermite as described by National Laboratory publications also implies the presence of carbon, very typically. The organic is used with nanothermite in order to produce gas, and that is a very high pressure gas. We do have descriptions from the Livermore National Laboratory in particular of how they fabricated this material, but to fabricate it is not so easy.
To fabricate it is not so easy. So you have this nanothermite particles found inside all the beams, all the wreckage, everywhere. And sorry guys, you have to hear my son playing guitar in the background. Hey buddy. Okay. We'll see if he keeps playing. But yeah, you have these nanothermite particles found all over the place. Now, why would there be even thermite particles anywhere? Because we know the temperature supposedly from when the planes hit, all the oil from the fuselage, scientists have concluded that the heating point from the oil was not enough to melt the steel. Not at all. So why was there thermite? And on top of it, this type of thermite you just heard here is not easy to make. So who would have access to something like this? Probably government, secret, who knows? Not civilian, maybe civilian, I'm not really sure, but most likely some up government entity, right? So that's something I always talk about with people when they say 9/11, the report is real, when I know it's not. So when I bring up the thermite, they really have no contradiction for it, no argument for it. And the last point I want to get into, because I know probably a lot of you guys already know about all the theories and the things that we think happened to the Twin Towers, I just want to play the other most important part on the free falling of the buildings. Here we go.
NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, acknowledges that the towers came down at essentially free-fall acceleration. What are the implications of that admission?
The measurements have indicated that Tower 1 collapsed in about 11 seconds and Tower 2 collapsed in about 9 seconds. This is essentially the rate at which free fall would happen.
The buildings actually accelerated as they came down, meaning they were not getting resistance from these massive columns in the center of the core of this building. The core of this building was very heavy. They're huge columns, huge.
This block accelerates straight down, or it's picking up speed downward continually. It doesn't slow down, it just continues to gain speed. It accelerates the entire time. And that was what was extremely significant. This structure was capable of holding 3 to 5 times the weight, and here it is falling through it with the resistance of only 1/3 of its weight.
It was falling through with 1/3 of its resistance when it could hold 3 to 4 times more than what was actually on top of it. Guys, if that's not a red flag, what else could be it? Let's continue.
Roughly 90% of the resistance has been removed, and what's happening is the top section is not crushing down the lower section like a pile driver, which is the picture that NIST basically is painting. It's actually falling into material that's already been pulverized, that's offering very little resistance. It's just coming down through pre-pulverized material.
Structural connections not only had to fail nearly simultaneously, but in sequential order.
You stood there and watched it destroy itself, wiping out floor by floor all 287 structural columns as if they didn't exist underneath the damage zone.
So there's more evidence, guys. And when you tie in the thermite and also the explosions that happened, because there was multiple reports of explosions, especially with World Trade Center Tower 7. What could, if the building was made to withstand 3 to 4 times the weight of the top part that fell, why did it all crumble inside of itself? And there was no resistance. The building fell at free fall. So there had to have been something eating away at the levels of each case as the top was falling down to let it free fall and come down in the amount of time that it did. With what? Seconds? Seconds, guys. The science doesn't... The report that they're giving doesn't add up with the science that's being given, the evidence that's being given. You have demolition engineers, demolition experts that say, just by looking at it, it looks like a building that they would demolish and the controlled demolition themselves a perfect example of it. Especially World Trade Center Tower 7 that didn't get hit by anything, and they're saying office fires brought the entire building down, right? So let's look at this a little bit more. We're gonna get some articles here. This one I thought was very interesting. Clinton White House ignored 9/11 warnings. In early 2000, the documents informed America's top intelligence analysts that Al-Qaeda had devised a sophisticated plan to hijack a commercial airliner departing from Frankfurt International Airport between March and August 2000. The terrorist team was to consist of an Arab, a Pakistani, and a Chechen, and their targets were U.S. airlines Lufthansa and Air France. The document pieces together an intricate plot directed by a 4-year-old Saudi, Sheikh Zabir, from a prominent family with ties to the House of Saud. It revealed that Al-Qaeda had actually penetrated the consular section of the Germany embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan, relying on a contact referred to as Mrs. Wagner to provide European Union visas for use in forged Pakistani passports for the terrorists. And the Clintons had knowledge of this at the time and did nothing about it. What a surprise, right? And not only that, after this happened, we get a report here. This was 4 days ago. Robert Mueller helped Saudi Arabia cover up its role in 9/11 attacks. Wow, Mr. Mueller is really involved with cover-ups, it seems like. And after the one he just went after Trump for, do you think he'd learn his lesson after this? But apparently not. Let's take a look. Former FBI investigators say their old boss didn't feel the same concern when they uncovered multiple systematic efforts by the Saudi government to assist the hijackers in the lead up to the 9/11 attacks, a far more consequential, to say nothing of deadly, foreign influence operation on America. 9/11 victims agree he was the master when it came to covering up the kingdom's role in 9/11, said survivor Sharon Primelli, who was pulled from the rubble of the World Trade Center 18 years ago. In October of 2001, Mueller shut down the government's investigation after only 3 weeks, and then took part in the Bush administration's campaign to block, obfuscate, and generally stop anything about Saudi Arabia from being released, added Primelli, now a plaintiff in the 9/11 lawsuit against Saudi Arabia. And here are some facts, guys, of what exactly Mueller did. And here are the scumbags we have here. Bush and Mueller. Time and again, agents were called off from pursuing leads back to the kingdom's embassy in Washington, as well as its consulate in Los Angeles, where former FBI agent Stephen Moore headed a 9/11 task force looking into the local contacts made by 2 of the 15 Saudi hijackers. Moore testified in an affidavit for the 9/11 lawsuit. He concluded that diplomatic and intelligence personnel of Saudi Arabia knowingly provided material support to the 2 hijackers and facilitated the 9/11 plot, yet he and his team were not allowed to interview them according to the suit. In Washington, former FBI agent John Quindalo, who worked terror cases out of the Bureau's D.C. office, said then Saudi Ambassador Prince Bandir should have been treated as a terrorist suspect for giving money to a woman who funded 2 of the 9/11 hijackers, but he was never questioned either. Sketchy. Mueller even tried to shut down a congressional investigation into the Saudi hijackers and their contacts in Los Angeles and San Diego, said Bob Graham, who led the joint inquiry as Senate Intelligence Committee chair. The strongest objections to his staff investigators visiting FBI offices there came from the FBI director himself, said Graham. The strongest objections to what they were doing came from the director himself. In a 2017 interview with Harper's Magazine. He also gave testimony to Congress that was, at the very least, misleading. And there he is. And the article continues. I'm not going to get into all of it, because I want to get into the last article here, which is giving everyone, including myself, some optimism of the future of what hopefully we're going to find out. So this was a great article by Mint Press News. More Americans questioning official 9/11 story as new evidence contradicts official narrative. While the events of that day did unite Americans in these ways for a time, the different trajectories of the official relative to the independent investigations into 9/11 attacks have also led to a division in the years since then. Yet with 18 years having come and gone, and with the tireless efforts from victims' families, first responders, scientists, and engineers, the tide appears to be turning as new evidence continues to emerge and calls for the new investigations while new investigations are made. However, American corporate media has remained largely silent, preferring to ignore new developments that could derail the official story, that's in quotes, of one of the most iconic and devastating attacks to ever occur in American soil. Let's jump into what this silence of the mainstream media on the subject is. For instance, in late July, commissioners for New York Area Fire Department, which responded to the attacks and lost one of their own that day, called for a new investigation into the events of September 11th on July. Into the events of September 11th. On July 24th, the Board of Commissioners for the Franklin Square and Munson Fire District, who we just mentioned before, which serves a population around 30,000 near Queens, voted unanimously in their call for a new investigation into the attacks. While the call for the new investigation from the New York Fire Department involved in the rescue effort would normally seem newsworthy to the media outlets who often rally Americans to never forget, right? All day we've been hearing, never forget. The commissioner's call for a new investigation was met with total silence from the mainstream media. What a surprise. The likely reason for the dearth of coverage on an otherwise newsworthy vote was likely due to the fact that the resolution that called for new investigation contained the following clause. And this is the big one, guys. Whereas the overwhelming evidence presented in said petition demonstrates beyond any doubt that pre-planted explosives and or incendiaries, not just airplanes, in the ensuing fires, caused the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center buildings, killing the vast majority of the victims who perished that day. This is the new investigation, guys, and their main bullet point up in front: explosives and pre-planted incendiaries were the cause, and ensuing fires were the main cause of the destruction of those buildings that day. But yet, no mainstream coverage. In the post 9/11 world, those who have made such claims, no matter how well grounded their claims may be, have often been derided and attacked as conspiracy theorists for questioning the official claims that the 3 World Trade Center buildings that collapsed on September 11th did so for any reason other than being struck by planes and from the resulting fires. Yet it is much more difficult to launch these same attacks against members of a fire department that lost a fireman on that day, and many of whose members were involved with the rescue efforts of that day. It's terrible. These pictures make me so sad. And another likely reason that the media monolithically avoided coverage of the vote was out of the concern that would lead more fire departments to pass similar resolutions, which would make it more difficult for such news to avoid gaining national coverage. Yet Commissioner Christopher Gaioa, who drafted and introduced the resolution, told those present at the meeting's conclusion that getting all the New York fire districts on board was their plan anyways. And I hope they do, and I can't see why they wouldn't be joining. We're a tight-knit community, and we never forget our fallen brothers and sisters. You better believe that when the entire fire service of New York State is on board, we will be an unstoppable force. We were the first fire district to pass this resolution. We won't be the last, and they won't be. And guys, I hope they get... We all want, except for the deep state, we all want what is on the other end of this investigation, the truth. While questioning the official conclusions of the first federal investigation into 9/11 has been treated as taboo in the American media landscape for years, it is worth noting that even those who led the commission have said that the investigation was set up to fail from the start and that they were repeatedly misled and lied to by federal officials in relation to the events of that day. For instance, the chair and vice chair of the 9/11 Commission report, Thomas Keane and Lee Hamilton, wrote in their book Without Precedent that not only was the commission starved of funds and its powers of investigation oddly limited, but they were obstructed and outright lied to by the top Pentagon officials and officials with the Federal Aviation Authority. They and other commissioners have outright said that the official report on the attack is incomplete, flawed, and unable to answer key questions about the terror attacks. Guys, the biggest attack on American soil was underfunded and its power investigation oddly limited and starved of funds. What else can be said? Really, what else can be said? And it infuriates me that when I talk to people about this, that they still believe the real report when this information's out there. It's so hard to love people sometimes, guys. I'm just speaking the truth here. Despite the failure of American corporate media to report these facts, local legislative bodies in New York, beginning with the fire districts that lost loved ones and friends that day, are leading the way in the search for real answers, and that those that wrote the official story say they were deliberately kept from them. And guys, this is talking about the World Trade Center 7. I'm not sure if I'll read all this, but we'll get into it. Persuasive scientific evidence continues to roll in. Let's see. Let's read it. It's important. Not long after the Franklin Square Munson Fire District called for a new 9/11 investigation, a groundbreaking university study added even more weight, which was just relating to the article that we talked before, called for a new look at the evidence regarding the collapse of the 3 buildings at the Trade Center complex. While most Americans know full well that the Twin Towers collapsed on September 11th, few are aware that the World Trade Center Building 7 also collapsed. It was not until nearly 2 months after its collapse that reports revealed that the CIA had a secret office in World Trade Center 7, and that after the building's destruction, a special CIA team scoured the rubble in search of secret documents and intelligence reports stored in the station, either on paper or on computers. WTC-7 also housed offices for the Department of Defense, the Secret Service, the New York Mayor's Office of Emergency Management, and the Bank Solomon Brothers. And the Bank of Solomon Brothers is a whole entire different rabbit hole in itself, and hopefully I'm going to get into that one day. Though the official story regarding the collapse of WTC-7 cites uncontrolled building fires as leading to the building's destruction, a majority of Americans who have seen the footage of the 47-story tower come down from 4 different angles overwhelmingly reject the official story based on a new poll. And that the poll found that 52% of those who saw the footage were either sure or suspected that the building's fall was due to explosive and was a controlled demolition, with 27% saying they didn't know what to make of the footage. And guys, as all this is, the rest of the article just goes into how the public, the American public, is shifting its opinion towards wanting a new investigation almost 20 years after the fact. And again, you can thank God we have Trump, because again, he's not from New York, but he's essentially a New Yorker. And there's a clip I had it in one of my videos of him talking about how the way these buildings were built, the Twin Towers with the steel on the outside. He said it was a extremely strong building, and I wish I could have the clip, but I don't have it now. But the whole point of this, guys, is just to again reinforce the story. Get the true narrative out there that we're being lied to. The official story that was given to us was an underfunded shitstorm, pretty much. That's all it was. A big, big lie. So, again, many of you may have already known all this information, but those who don't, please go watch Loose Change. It's a documentary made in 2007. And just really research this, guys. There's way, way more evidence than what I've shown you that I could fit in this video. You could spend days finding this stuff. It's all out there. It's all backed by science. And I believe the truth will come out on this, because it's going to be one of the biggest stories ever in our history to come out. So with that, guys, I'm going to end this. I'm going to end today's episode. Just please give some thoughts, prayers, meditate, whatever you guys do, however you guys do it. Just think about the first responders that died that day. Think about the first responders in your communities and what they sacrifice every day. Because a lot of these families don't have answers, and the ones that did survive are now dying from cancer, from breathing in all the terrible, fumes, debris, gases, dust, and they're suffering. And they had nothing to do with this. They were doing their jobs and they did everything they could to save as many lives as they could. So with that, guys, please drop a comment. Let me know where you guys were on that day. And again, as always, subscribe, like, share this content, get it out there. Guys, I really need the channel to be shared at this point, because I can feel it, I can see it in my numbers. I'm being censored, along with all the other channels that report on the topics that I cover, especially this one about 9/11. Get it out there, share it with everybody. Get the truth out there. We are going to overcome big social media, the censorship. We will overcome it one day, and I'm never going to stop. we're going to keep it rolling. So until then, guys, keep your eyes and ears open. Stay safe out there. Again, thank a first responder, our military. Thank all of them, guys. They are the reason we are able to do and afford all the privileges that we have today. So until then, guys, stay woke.